One question I get asked a lot on my channel is, if you're going to buy a Legion, should you buy the Lenovo Legion Pro 7, whether it's AMD or Intel, the 7 here, or should you try to save a little bit of money, or a lot of money depending, and get yourself the 5 Pro? So 5 Pro or 7 Pro? It's not an easy question because there is a price gap between them, but there's also other things to consider, such as how high the GPU goes, potentially what's going on inside the laptop, thermals, noise, all that kind of stuff, AMD versus Intel. So it's not an easy question. I get asked it a lot. So in this video here, I'm going to be looking at the 5 Pro and the 7 Pro. For the 5 Pro, I'm not that interested in the AMD model for the 5 Pro, unfortunately. So we're going to look at the Intel model here. Now, this is the most interesting of the 5 Pros, the 5070 Ti. So the 275HX with the 5070 Ti. I also have the Intel model of the 7 Pro. This one here has a RTX 5090, so it's all the way up the stack. You can get those with a 5080 or 5070 Ti, but I decided to get the top one, 5090, so that it's interesting. So we have a 5070 Ti Pro, 5090 7i Pro, and to make things very interesting, because this is also something that I get asked sometimes, I also got the AMD model. And the AMD model here, you get a couple options. I decided to get the most interesting of the AMD ones, which is the one with the X3D CPU. So today I'm going to be looking at the AMD and Intel model of the 7 Pro, and I'm only going to be looking at the Intel model of the 5 Pro. I'm going to show you why here. So on the Intel model over here of the 7 Pro, it has a really neat thing going on. You get the 275HX CPU no matter what you do. It's a great CPU. You do have access to C-SODIMM, which is faster memory, 6400 mega transfers instead of 5600. Awesome. So you can do that. It will take standard SODIMM, but you can get C-SODIMM when you buy it. That's great. Very nice. And you have access to 3 tiers of GPU, 5070 Ti, 5080, and 5090. So you get the whole spread here. The Intel model, you get the full spread. You don't go below that, but if you're going to get into a 5070 non-Ti, you just go down to a Pro, like a 5 Pro. There's no point in paying all that money here to get into here. So full spread here. Awesome. Now the AMD model is a little different. You have the 9955HX, which will only allocate you to a 5070 Ti, which is still decent, right? I'm not as big of a fan of that CPU, but you do get access to a 5070 Ti. So if you can get one of these for a good price, then it's not a bad laptop. You'll get a very powerful 16-core CPU, and you'll get a good 5070 Ti, full watts and everything. But what's really interesting here is on the AMD model, you get access to this, the 9955HX 3D. X3D cache allows it to be more powerful, or more, I don't know, you'll get more frames, we'll put it that way, in online games like MMOs. You'll get more frames in simulation games, and potentially if you're playing online shooters and that kind of stuff, if you go to a low resolution. So for competitive type gaming, this can be beneficial. This CPU I'm not the biggest fan of. It's okay. If you can get it for a good price, whatever, it's fine. It's not the biggest deal, but I wouldn't personally get it. This one here stands out. It's interesting, right? Because you get that X3D cache, and it does lock you into the 5080. You cannot get it with 5070 Ti. So that's a negative, I suppose, but it's interesting, right? You get in here, you're getting a 5080, and you're getting a 9955HX 3D, which I'm doing today, which does set it apart from even this one here, right? This is a 5080 and a 275HX, so it's going to be more efficient in that regards, better battery life, all that kind of stuff. If you don't care so much about that, you can get into this one with the X3D, and you'll get, slightly better gaming performance at, high resolutions, and it can be considerable depending on the type of game you're playing, especially at low resolution. So this one makes sense that there is AMD and Intel because they're unique, specifically because of that X3D. Now over here on the 5 Pro, the AMD model doesn't really have any reason to exist, in my opinion. It's kind of dumb. So we come down here and we get 3 CPUs. The 8745HX, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that CPU. It's a low core, 8 core, 16 thread. For gaming, it'll be fine. You can use this for gaming and have no problems with that. And heavy CPU, like, rendering, that kind of stuff, and code compile, it's okay. I wouldn't get it. I would get one of these two. These are essentially functionally the same CPU. So yeah, the CPUs are all okay here. You have good GPU options, 5050, 5060, 5070, but it's just a weird combination. Like, you don't get that X3D cache here. These CPUs you're not going to get good battery life with them. You lose out on some things. You don't have access to Thunderbolt or anything like that, or USB 4. Whereas on the Intel model, you do get access to those things. So you get into two different options here. You can get the two, these are the weird ones from before. You get the 255HX CPU, so it'll come in here. You can do the 255HX CPU or the 275HX CPU. They're very similar. Pick whichever one you want. There's slightly more core counts here, but they're both very good CPUs. These CPUs are better than what we have on the Intel, AMD over here. They're just better. They will give you the same or better raw performance and much better battery life, and they're more efficient. So they're just better CPUs. And because the AMD model does not have this X3D over here on the 5 Pro, it's not interesting to me, right? Coming down here, on this SKU, you don't have C SODIMM, you just have normal SODIMM, but you can put it in, it'll work. You only have a 5060, 5070. You do not have a 5050. But there's a separate SKU. It's the same thing, but you have this model here that's 275HX with the 5070 Ti. So there's really, I don't see any, the AMD here model is not interesting because you get a worse CPU offering in both cases. You do not get as high of a GPU. You can't even get up to that 5070 Ti, right? You can't get up to that 5070 Ti. You do have a 5050 model, sure, but there are better and more budget-friendly 5050 models, even from Lenovo. So I'm not a big fan of the Intel. I'm not a big fan of the AMD model of the 5 Pro. The Intel model is quite interesting because you can get all the way up to a 5070 Ti. The Intel model is very interesting because you can get all the way up to that 5070 Ti with that good CPU. So it's a really good model, and that's what I'm going to be reviewing here today. Okay, so what is the difference between these here? This is the AMD one. Let's actually swap that out here. We'll put in the Intel one. The reason is because then they'll have the same CPU. We will do some comparisons here. I am also, I'm working on my review of the AMD one as well, so we can of course talk about that. But we're also going to talk about thermals and noise and that when we have the same CPU here. They don't have the same GPU, but same CPU, and see how they perform under full load, that kind of stuff, and we'll talk about that. They do both get fingerprints. This one has a quick wipe a few minutes ago. This one here is a fresh kneading of wipe. They are both very bad for fingerprints, just so you know, quite bad. But it is a smooth surface, so you can wipe them down relatively easily. Get them nice and clean. There you go. They don't have the same height. You can see that there. That's the 5. That's the 7. Because this has a little bit more back, I guess I'd say. You can see here this hinges part way. So we'll just move that over there slightly. Right, you can see they hinge at a slightly different spot. If we actually were to flip them upside down, like that there, put the screens right on top of each other, just like that, right? So at this point now they're the same. You see there's a little bit more height on the screen, the bezel, not the actual screen itself, but the bezel and the frame of the screen on the 7, and the bum goes out a little bit further as well. Just slightly more cooling, slightly more stuff going on, so that makes sense. Thickness is very similar. Technically this is a touch thinner, but it's very, very minimal. At the back, it does end up being thinner in that spot there, primarily because this is actually lined up with the screen. So it just has this kind of empty spot there. Very cool. Plastic bottom on the 5. The 7 has a metal bottom, whether it's Intel or AMD, has a metal bottom. There's actually a fan there, so there's extra intake here. 1 and 2, 1 and 2, exhaust at the back. But this also has another auxiliary fan right there, so there's a little empty spot there to just kind of pull some air in with some other cooling agents there. Very good. Speakers firing down there. Speakers firing down there. Very good. Port selection, neither of them have any ports on the back. You can see the 7 does have a beefier back. There's actually like physically that radiator is taller and larger, thicker. So it's not just, the fans and all that kind of stuff. This is physically a larger like radiator at the back there. So there's more metal mass. More metal mass means more area, more surface area. More surface area means more surface area to be cooled. So when air comes out of this, there's more surface area to help this thing cool down. So even that alone should help with cooling. More vents in the center there to also help with just generally having more radiator fins. The more radiator fins you have, the better, as long as you can get air through them, and the denser they are, of course, as well, is better. Very nice. Otherwise, they're exactly the same here. Headphone, 2 USB-A, camera kill switch, BIOS level, and then of course we do have RJ45 Ethernet on the flip side there. Power delivery USB-C, Thunderbolt on these because they're Intel. The AMD one does not have USB 4, which is kind of an L, unfortunately. 2 fast USB-A HDMI, and power. Very good. They do all power off of USB-C. You can power all of them off of USB-C. Of course, you don't get full power, obviously, not even close to full power, but it's enough for, honestly, like just CPU tasks. If you're not leveraging the CPU and the GPU, it's more than enough, to be quite honest. Depending on what mode you're running in, because it'll run in silent, you can do things like gaming. It just needs to be, lower wattage. You'd have to really play with those wattages and get them down. If you want to go into custom mode, you also need to have it plugged in with a proprietary port. But USB-C, it can be used otherwise on a standard basis. Okay, so here is a look inside of them. We have the 7i Pro, or 7 AMD Pro, and then we have the 5i Pro here. They are quite different inside. They're both pretty good considering their class, but obviously there's a lot more going on in the 7. So this is a 5070 Ti, 5080. So they're both relatively performant, obviously, in terms of performance. 80 watt-hour battery on the 5 to start here. So that's reasonable for what it is. There's a little bit of extra room here. They could put something slightly bigger, but they did a pretty good job overall filling it out. 99 watt-hour battery here on the 7i Pro. So you do get 20% larger battery. The AMD version of this is pretty bad for battery life. You'll see in that section here, whereas the Intel is quite a bit better. But that extra battery does help nonetheless, so that's good. We do have differences in speakers. The 7i Pro, 7 Pro come with better speakers, significantly better speakers than the 5 series. These have these kind of little Peasley ones. I mean, they work, but they're not great. These will sound a lot better. Other things before we get into the upgradability, you can obviously see quite a bit of a difference in terms of cooling. The 5 series here, you do get a dual heat pipe setup here. They use a PTM under here, no liquid metal or anything like that, but PTM is still good nonetheless. 2 big heat pipes. Then you do get a lot of VRM coverage here, so VRAM and VRMs and all that kind of stuff. There's quite a bit of coverage there, but a 2-fan setup, reasonably big fans. They have that kind of curved style to them, which does give them a little bit less turbulence and noise. So they do produce like volume when they move air, but it's not incredibly annoying or anything like that. So that's pretty good. Not too bad. Over here though, we have quite an enhanced cooling system here. So for one thing, we have a giant vapor chamber here. So vapor chamber is obviously going to be much better than your traditional heat pipe with 2 heat pipes at least. So this is going to be quite nice. You'll be getting a lot more cooling there. The fans are the same style and everything, so there's nothing really different there, but the vapor chamber does offer quite a bit more cooling, and vapor chambers in general work quite well. We do have a 3rd fan, an auxiliary fan here that's going to blow even more air through just to help cool stuff a little bit better. So obviously you're going to get quite a bit better cooling that way. And the coverage here extends quite a bit over, so you're actually getting full coverage on your SSDs, both of them, and your RAM here all as one giant plate. This whole plate just kind of comes off, so that's great. Very, very impressive cooling here. This, like as I said, does use PTM 7950. This one here is a combination of liquid metal and PTM, so don't take this off unless you're willing to service the liquid metal here. I haven't heard any stories of it leaking out, but down the future, like if you are going to service it or something, just be aware that is liquid metal under there. Don't take it out and be like, I'm just going to throw some thermal paste on it. PTM also does not really need to be does not do service for a very long period of time. So that's great. The other difference here, we do have on the 5, the first slot here for NVMe. It comes with a 2242, but you can put in a full one without any problems. You just take that out and then put it in there. You do get your second slot over here, 2280 as well. And they both do accept, this one you can definitely get an 8 terabyte in here. This one you can, depending, there's a little bit of stuff under it. So typically over here, I usually put in a 1-sided NVMe, and then I put a 2-sided over there. This one here, you can put it in both. Lots of room in here. 8 terabyte on this side here, and because it takes dual-sided over here, once again, I only recommend putting a single-sided over here as well. The RAM is under here, so you have to take off this whole shield to service the RAM, whereas on the 5, you actually just pop off of this here, and your RAM is under there. So upgrading the RAM on this is much easier, upgrading the storage, because they're exposed. Here, you do have to take off this plate. It's not too difficult, but you do have to take off this plate to upgrade the storage or the RAM or change it out, because this one focuses a little bit more on cooling. As a result, the bottom, this is a metal bottom, and there's not much really going on here, just some plastic structure there and then a metal bottom. The 5 is a plastic bottom. It's a premium plastic, but pretty firm and sturdy and everything. Interestingly, it's actually, this is probably slightly heavier. And then you actually get your thermal pad. That one's slightly off, interestingly. And they have a thermal pad here. There we go, like that. And a little bit of like a tiny little piece of copper just working on a bit more heat sink. and then a big thermal pad there. So generally this one should keep your SSDs a little cooler, but not too bad. But overall, I mean, they're both good, right? So you do get obviously some more premium on the 7, where it has the metal bottom, slightly better speakers, obviously, right? A little bit of a better cooling system here, bigger battery. So this is obviously you're paying not just in that. Some people have asked me, why is the 5 Pro, especially if you get a 5070 Ti and a 5070 Ti or something like that, they're like, why am I paying so much more to get into this? Well, you're not necessarily paying for, the components, same SSD, same GPU, for example. If you do that, you're paying for some of the extras in here, more cooling, vapor chamber cooling, extra fans, more battery, better speakers, that kind of stuff. So very interesting. Now they do have the same keyboard in a sense, but they're not also exactly the same. So the layout is the same, but the RGB is a little different. So you can see here on the 7 Pro, we do have access to this RGB line under here where you can set up a little bit more RGB here. That's cool. Here we don't have access to that, so you can't do it. We'll come into the RGB software here. RGB software here. Click the wrong button. There we go. Now this is where things get a little different. So not only do we have this ring down there, that's fine, whatever it is, what it is, but we also have slightly more customizability here. So if you can see here, so we'll make that one be that there, or something like that. I'm just messing about. You can do whatever you want. And then I could make the other stuff off, or I could make the whole keyboard, something like that. And I could go like that, and I want you to be something like that, spiral rainbow, and I want this to be off, the numpad, or I can make the numpad something else. So what I'm saying here is each key is customizable one by one. So you have per key RGB here. Some people have people say that, they don't necessarily know what that means, but you can do per key RGB. You can also customize the Legion logo on the back. Rear ambient is the vents there, right here. We can change those if we want. And of course the front strip down here. Then over here, it's a little different. With the 5, we have zonal, right? So you can get 3 tiers. You can get per key. You can get zonal where it's like 1, 2, and 3. And then you can this style where it's like zonal in terms of you get like strips, right? So you can come in here, and it's a little weird because you don't have per key anymore. They're lighting strips, right? So that's one set of keys right there. Lots of little zones, not like 1, 2, 3, but you get lots of little zones. Here you have much more customizability. So that's just something to be aware of here. You have significantly more RGB. So that's another thing you're buying into with this here. Okay, and then we do have the inside here. So we do have the 5 and the 7. You can see here we do have very, very reflective screens. I wish that Lenovo did offer a non-reflective variant, either a non-reflective OLED or just an IPS. That would do the trick, honestly. But everyone's obsessed with OLEDs right now, so it is what it is. They're both the same on this too. 1600p, 240 hertz refresh, 100% DCI-P3, exactly the same screens. This one you can also get 165 hertz variant if you care. That will give it basically exactly the same specs, but it has a lower refresh. Not that it really makes any real world of a difference there. So that's something to be aware of. Otherwise, I mean, the internals here look more or less identical, right? Here we do have this little like ledge here with some extra goodies up here. Don't have that here. So that actually sits down further because this hinges in there. This hinges into the body. Just something to be aware of there. They are going to be very bad for fingerprints, unfortunately. It just is what it is. But yeah, that's just something you got to deal with. Okay, now what I want to do here is I want to compare the speakers. I'm not going to have compared max volume. But what I do want to compare is kind of like volume, like sound quality, put it that way. And this will be subjective, but it's pretty straightforward to be honest with this one. But I'll give you a subjective analysis of how they sound to me. So we'll go with the 5. This is a pretty standard listening volume, like 50, 60 when it's in front of you. Seven. yeah, so I mean, they're not going to, neither of them are going to match like a MacBook Pro 16-inch or something, or my Yoga 9i Pro, but there is a pretty big difference nonetheless. So this one here, the 5, it's passable. Like, it's not a bad set of speakers, but they don't do much for me outside of that. They'll be fine for like casual music listening. They're more for like games and, you know, shows and that kind of stuff. They'll do the trick, right? The 7 Pro obviously are much better. You get more speakerage in general, and there's a lot more bass and a lot more richness and fullness. So these are much better speakers here. They sound considerably better over here. Okay, so let's see now what kind of wattages and the like we get here. Go like that there. Okay, so let's see what we can kind of get here. This is the Intel model, and this is the Intel model. As you can see, 275, 275HX. So this is a good comparison. We will bring in the AMD model because that's part of the comparison. That is in this lineup here. So we will bring it in, but we'll start with like for like, just to kind of see, you know, how that shapes up here. This is as high as you can get with the 5 Pro, 5070 Ti. This is as high as you can get with the 7 Pro, so 5090. So they're both all the way at the top of their own respective stacks. Idling here, 43, 62, 43, 46, 48, so really nothing, and close enough over here. Not really any difference there. Wattages, 17. This is jumping up and down, but they're basically the same. This one might be doing something else. But they're around the same. There goes a drop down. So yeah, they're around the same. So nothing really going on with either of them. We'll start in performance mode here. Let's actually, I do want to check the noise too. So we're going to run them because in theory, they should have around the same performance. However, this in theory should have slightly better cooling, maybe. So we're going to run them independently though, because there is one thing that should be different, and that will be noise. Of course, when we bring in the AMD model, it'll be totally different, but I want to see how the noise is on this. So we'll come in here. We're going to run the 5 here, and then we will continue on. There's absolutely no sound when they're idle, just as a heads up. So we'll come over here. So it is hot. It's raised up, by the way. People have asked me that before, of course. It is throttling. The fans will kick up and should help a little bit. Obviously, the performance is quite good on that first run. What do we get? 37,000 on the first run there. 100 or almost 200 watts dump, and then it's still up quite high. So even though it's throttling, it's still, you know, trying to dump as many watts as it can. Okay, now I think we're reaching peak cooling fan noise, and as much as it can possibly do. So around 57. The initial CPU boost wore out, and now we're down at about 124. No longer are we throttling, but we are pretty warm. 95, 94, 88 there. But that's as much as the boost could have done. So it did that 195, dropped down to 160. Now the CPU boost is off, and we'll be able to, should be able to just kind of hang around there, in theory. Okay, that's more or less turning off now. It'll take a second, but that's fine. This is silent, like I said. So same very high wattage dump. It is theoretically throttling. Check that first run. It's higher, 38,700. So, I mean, better cooling, right? Big vapor chamber on this one here. And that's going to give us 38,700 on that first run. It is throttling once again, but it is slightly cooler, as you can see here. 98 or so. This one was really sticking around the throttling. But again, it is still throttling, but it's able to do more before it throttles. See those watts there? The turbo boost here is higher, so it's able to maintain the full turbo boost at around 195 longer. The Legion 5 was dropping down to about 165 after a little bit of its turbo boost, so it was still trying to boost, the CPU was still trying to boost, but it was too hot. Here, it's able to maintain a little bit, almost its peak turbo boost the whole time. right? So that shouldn't really come down at all. Now the fan profile and noise on this is actually even less. It's really not annoying at all. This is really nice, even quieter fan. Okay, so now we'll do the AMD one. Otherwise, you know, very similar. It's a 5080. That makes no difference here, though. The interior is all the same. The only difference here is we have the 9955HX3D. So we'll see what it is. The idle is similar, maybe a touch warmer, but very similar. These will idle at a higher watt, though, this chip here. So if we come down, we can see here, it does idle at a slightly higher watt. Yeah, so there you go. I mean, in CPU-based tasks, the Intel and the AMD aren't going to be hugely different. Obviously, there's battery life considerations, but they're not going to be hugely different. Then when you compare to the 5i, so we'll get this one out of here, and you know, you get the Legion 5 down here versus the Legion 7. The Legion 5 doesn't cool as well, so it's not able to maintain those higher wattages as long, but it still performs very well. Okay, so we'll just do a quick comparison here in Spider-Man. I mean, we're not really looking at performance, but at the same time, I guess we could. I mean, this is the Legion Pro with the 5090, so it shows how high you can go with this. This is how high you can go with this Legion 7 with the Legion 5. So I mean, we're basically saying how high can you go with this, how high can you go with this, and we're maxing both. So there is some legitimacy here. We do have crazy settings here. So we do have a little bit of scaling, balanced transformer model, just because I do want to get the FPS up slightly. And then we just have everything just way up, very high, very high, very high. There's a couple things we can turn up probably here in ray tracing, like this very high, very high, very high. All that, right? Turned way up here. Way, 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 way up. So the game is just ripping right now. So we'll just sit here for a moment. It's been running already for about 10 minutes. But what I want to show here is kind of like cooling and performance and wattages and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, so obviously the 5090 is more powerful than 5070 Ti. Pretty significant. It's not double, but it's getting way up there, right? 77 FPS versus 127. So the max cap of these two laptops is hugely different, where the 7i Pro is able to get much more powerful because it can get up to a 5090. This one here, you cannot do that, right? So you can go up to 5070 Ti. Both great, considering the settings we're at. They're both very respectable performance. Now, what I do want to show you here as well, the GPU here is pulling 150 or so, 135, so more watts, right, going to the GPU here. And despite that, this is running cooler. So 81 degrees, 87 degrees, right? Both backs are raised up. This is running hotter than this with lower watts. So this is going from like 150, 155, it's even jumping up. So at least 20 more watts, which is quite a bit more, 15, 16% more watts, and it's actually running quite a bit cooler. So it really is showing just how much better the cooling is on this system here. Okay, very good. The CPU, big difference in the CPU here though. You can see that the CPU is running only at 60, 70 watts. Here it's running at 100 watts. So because this GPU is so powerful, it's really, really pushing a lot of, I guess, performance onto the CPU, right? The CPU is getting hit really hard. But as a result, it's ripping the frames out, right? Like that's way higher frames. So yes, it's running hotter, the CPU here, but you can see here that the cooling system, it's just because it's getting way more watts of the CPU, like almost double, right? Way more. So it's going to run a little hotter, of course. But the GPU is actually running way cooler. Now, one thing that we can do to just, you know, kind of equal the playing field here. Okay, so it's a little hard to set them up exactly the same because there's cross-loading between CPUs and GPUs. This one has a higher profile, this one has lower, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to put the GPU at 100 for both. Okay, power limits, you know, 80 here, 70, 70, yada, yada, yada. And we're just going to try to not share GPU to CPU, right? Anything like that. And I'm going to see what we get here with the same temperatures. It might not be exactly the same because they always fiddle a little bit with one another, but just kind of see what we get here. Both in the custom mode here. So I'm going to let this run for a minute like this. Okay, we're back here. So yeah, it's just been, they bounce around a little bit on the CPU and GPU, but they're kind of the same. Might go up and down, whatever. Maybe a few more. For some reason the watts are a couple higher here, but it's not the biggest deal. The GPUs are 100-ish on both, so we can see here, just generally speaking, so at the same wattages, the GPU here is running at 73, 75, 68, right? So way cooler over here. The CPU here is also about the same, so 80-ish, 80-ish, right? So about the same. So we can just generally say that the cooling is better over here because it's running cooler on the GPU when the CPU is going whatever. But of course, also when we max this thing out, right, it's going to run better over here. It's going to run just overall a little bit better. Now, it's going to be very hard to show on camera, but this laptop here is also a little bit louder. There'll be cross-contamination of noise. And even with this leaking noise in, this is quieter. Okay, we'll go all the way to style it. Or up to performance, I mean. Come like that. Again, they'll be leaking over here, but it's hard to describe. This one has a much lower tone. That's something I just have to qualitatively tell you. The tone of this is lower. This one has a slightly higher pitch because the fans are, working hard to keep this thing cool. They're both fairly loud under load, though. Under full load, they're quite similar. On balance mode, this one is quieter. On silent mode, we'll just have to see. 46. And again, there is leaking noise between the two of them, so this one's definitely quieter. Under full load, they're very, very similar, but when you're turning them down, this one is definitely a little bit louder. So I mean, that's that, right? The Legion 7i Pro, it allows for more watts to the CPU especially. Obviously the GPU here, because it's a 5080, 5090, depending on which one, obviously it allows more watts to that, but even the CPU, it allows more watts too. And despite that, even with the CPU here running with more watts, and of course it gets hotter because it has way more watts going to it under full load, the GPU is still running cooler over here than over there with more watts. So it's running more CPU, way more CPU, and quite a bit more GPU wattages over here, and it's actually under full load, it's actually able to keep the GPU especially cooler over here than over here, and it's shared cooling. So we can generally say that this just runs cooler overall. They both run very well, but I mean, it's vapor chamber cooling, and good vapor chamber cooling versus heat pipes, it's just more robust.